Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wa imam al-mursaleen. Sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Allahumma faqihna fi din wa alimna ta'wil wa ja'alna min khayrati ummati Sayyidina Muhammadin alayhi afdalus salati wa tammu taslim. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. We seek Allah's protection from knowledge that does not benefit, from a heart that has no khushu, from a nafs that's never had enough, from an eye that does not tear, and from a dua that's not heard. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah everyone's well. And we continue with the Seerah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the life of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the biography of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and lessons that we can learn from it. So before we continue, as we do normally, we speak about the people of Palestine. We ask that everyone remember them in your du'as. Truly it is a really difficult time for them. So please remember them in your du'as. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them. Whatever, in any way you can assist in terms of charity work, etc. Raising your voice as well about what's happening. That's really important. That's kind of part of the battle at the moment. You know, when you got social media, so much information being thrown out there. You know, if it's misinformation, fake information, then rectifying that, you've got this option as well. So please remember them in your du'as. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them. And so we continue. And as we're approaching Ramadan as well, actually, we're approaching Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, things are going to become so much more difficult. Okay. Remember the blessed month of Ramadan coming about. Continue, you know, to make dua for them. Inshallah. So we move on. We talk about move on to the Seerah. So where have we got to? We got to the past couple of weeks. We've been speaking about the conquest of Makkah. Okay, the conquest of Makkah and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They're, you know, setting off from Medina. Ensuring that no one kind of the word does not reach the Quraysh that they are on their way, and the purpose of this was that so there's no bloodshed. Okay, that it's bloodless. They feel that they're in a position where, you know what, it's pointless. Let's just give up. There was a reason behind it. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ has marched on Makkah following the breaking of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. So Prophet ﷺ marched with an army of 10,000 warriors. Okay, the army has entered into Makkah largely bloodlessly. There was one abortive attack led by Ikrimah that we covered last week. Okay, which was kind of quickly repulsed. So the Prophet ﷺ has made good his taking of Makkah. Okay, he's performed tawaf, okay, around the Kaaba. He's entered the Kaaba. He's prayed in the Kaaba. He's addressed the Quraysh. The famous words: "There will be no retaliation on you today." Okay, there's no retribution upon you today. Okay? God has forgiven you, for He is the most merciful of those who show mercy. Okay, let me just quickly, actually, before we move on, go through a few hadiths, inshallah. Narrated Anas ibn Malik that on the day of the conquest, the Prophet ﷺ entered Makkah, and upon his head was a helmet. When he took it off, a man came and said, "Ibn Khattal is clinging to the." Actually, we'll cover that part later. Narrated Abdullah ibn Umar that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ entered Makkah through his upper part, riding his she-camel with Usama ibn Zayd seated behind him, and with him were Bilal and Uthman ibn Talha, who was from those who hold the key to the Kaaba. The Prophet ﷺ entered Makkah on the day of the conquest. Around the Kaaba there were 360 idols. He started to strike them with the stick they had in the hand. He was saying, "The truth has come and falsehood has vanished away. The truth has come and falsehood will neither start nor repeat." Prophet ﷺ arrived in the year of the conquest with Usama was riding behind him on Al-Qaswa. Bilal and Uthman ibn Talha were accompanying him till he made his she-camel kneel down near the house. Then he said to Uthman, "Bring us the key." He brought the key to him and opened the door for him. When the Prophet when the Messenger of Allah came to Makkah, he refused to enter the Kaaba with idols inside it. So he ordered and they were removed. They took out pictures of Ibrahim and Ismail holding divining arrows in their hands. Thereupon the Messenger of Allah said, "May Allah curse these people. By Allah, do they not know that neither of these two ever use divining arrows?" Okay, we spoke about this last week. The Prophet ﷺ arrived in Makkah and called for Uthman ibn Talha. So he opened the door, and the Prophet ﷺ, Bilal, Usama ibn Zayd and Uthman ibn Talha entered and then closed the door. They stayed therein for an hour, then came out. Narrated Ibn Umar, who said the Prophet ﷺ stayed there for a long period and then came out. The people rushed to enter, but I went in before them and found Bilal standing by the door. I said to him, "Where did the Prophet ﷺ pray?" SubhanAllah, look again, and we mentioned it last week. Ibn Umar kind of concerning, where did he pray? Where did he pray? Every little detail of the Prophet ﷺ. And we showed images last week as well, that this is where it's been marked out. This is where the Prophet ﷺ prayed inside the Kaaba. So I said, "Where did the Prophet ﷺ pray?" He said, as in Bilal said, he prayed between those two front pillars. The house was built upon 6 pillars arranged in 2 rows, and he prayed between the 2 pillars of the front row, with the gate of the Kaaba at his back, facing the wall that is in front when one enters the Kaaba. He added, I forgot to ask him how many units he had prayed. There was a piece of red marble at the place where the Prophet had prayed. Okay, I'm saying a few. There's more as well, but as we go ahead, maybe next week as well, or maybe later on, I'll mention some. Okay, so Makkah has there been, bloodlessly conquered, following nearly 10 years of warfare, following 10 years of persecution of the Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ has come home. Now remember a few things here. The first is what we've said at the beginning of this course, of the beginning of these lessons that we speak about, and throughout. To truly understand the magnitude of what is going on, it's very important to see the Sahaba first and foremost as humans. Okay, human beings. The reverence we have for the Sahaba. Notwithstanding that, in order to really understand the Seerah, one has to view the Sahaba as human beings. You have to be able to imagine yourself there. Okay, there you are. Now think about it yourself. As you've been persecuted for 10 years. You've seen your family and your friends being killed, tortured, imprisoned, just because of your faith. Okay, you've had to leave your home behind. You've left your wealth behind. You've left everything behind. Okay, to become a refugee in a foreign land. Okay, even within that foreign land, you go to this foreign land, they still pursue you in that foreign land. Okay, you're still being hunted in that foreign land. Look how many times they came to attack them in Medina. Okay, now war has come to you. Okay, you've had to fight. You've had to you've sent out your husbands. You've sent out your sons to fight. When we talk about the women here. Okay, many have been martyred. You sent them out, they've not come back. Slowly, bit by bit. The Prophet ﷺ has brought about this incredible situation that within your own lifetime, here, you're not just going back home, you're not going back home under this flag of amnesty, you're not going back home after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah just to be back for as a minority again. You've gone home as as you're traveling towards these people, your own people that have been attacking you, persecuting you. What is it that you're seeing? Okay, you're seeing all these people kind of joining your army, marching next to you. People who you once fought against. Tribes that you went out to battle with. They're now marching beside you. And they're kind of converging onto Makkah. Okay, so you arrive in Makkah. You remember, we know what's happened with Abraha. Okay, Abraha marched on Makkah with a great army. Okay, and what happened to his army? And I described this because we had Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq's father who stood there looking out. Okay, but Abraha came, and this is within your kind of lifetime. Remember this, that the thinking by all of these people was that 60 years ago, Abraha came with his army. Exactly the same situation here. Someone's coming here. Well, according to them, same situation is coming to kind of destroy us. Okay, coming along with an army. That time, God saved us. Allah saved us. Now He's going to save us again. He's going to save His house once again. Yeah, He'll do it again. In the year of the elephants, it's only like 60 years ago. Like I said, this is not a myth. And this happened more recently than World War II has happened for us. Okay, more recently than we speak so much about World War II. World War II, if you compare it, it was more recent than World War II for them. Okay, so what happens? A massive, strong army, far superior to the armies of the Quraysh. The Quraysh vacated Makkah and fled into the mountains to avoid it. Okay, it's destroyed basically by sparrows. That's what happened at the time of the elephant. They just ran away, didn't they? The Quraysh, they went to the mountains. We can't fight against this army. And basically, sparrows come along and they destroy this army. Okay, as we mentioned about Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, who saw this army come, mowed down by the kind of weakest force of the nature could muster. Yeah, not an earthquake, not a volcanic eruption, etc. No, nothing like that. It wasn't like a stampede of elephants and lions, but by birds with stones in their beaks. Okay, and it's a case of if Allah saved His house once, He can do it again. But nothing's happening. Okay, there you are. They're marching into Makkah, seeing the land that you used to know. Seeing the houses you used to know. But also seeing the places where you were humiliated. Okay, the place that you were abused. The face of those who humiliated, the face of those who kind of abused you. Okay, it's no wonder that then Saad said to Abu Sufyan, Abu Sufyan, the leader who led this rebellion against them. He said to him, today you're going to get it. Today you're going to get it. Okay, it's kind of like we're going to get you back for all those things that you've been doing. Okay, we're going to get you back for all the things you're doing. So the Muslims are not kind of marching into Makkah with Makkah having kind of converted to Islam. Remember this. They haven't converted to Islam. They've just been caught by surprise. The Qurayshis are still pagans. Okay, at this point. They haven't laid down their swords. They're just in their houses. That's all that's happened. Okay, and that's the situation here. And then you hear the Prophet ﷺ say, Haza Yawmul Marhama. Okay. Now, this is a day of forgiveness. And you're probably thinking, well, did I hear something wrong there? Yeah. It's a case of, what's going on here? Think of all these kind of refugee camps, for example, that we come across, for the moment. See how we feel for them, how we feel for those who, we feel, the anger we have for them. They've been kind of driven out their homes, bombed their homes, killed them, chased, them away and all that stuff. Okay. No difference here. It's like if you want to kind of imagine it, this is what I'm trying to say. If you're trying to imagine it like that. Okay, imagine like that. So imagine those refugees kind of coming back, the same refugees going back, but this time the swords in your hand. Like if you say the whips in your hand now. In their hand, you think, did I hear the Prophet ﷺ say that correctly? Okay, did he say marhama or did he kind of echo malhama? Okay, and then you go and you see that the first thing that the Prophet ﷺ does is not to call a council with the leader of the Quraysh, not to kind of set up the gallows or do anything like that. But the very first thing he does upon entering Makkah is he remembers God. Okay, he makes everybody there remember God. Okay, very first thing he does is go to the Kaaba and do tawaf. And some of that kind of anger and bitterness kind of starts to seep out. Okay, this is like 7 rounds around the house. It's not a short time. He's being led around on a camel so that everyone can see him. Okay, why is he not walking? Because he wants everyone to see him. The Haram is not like it's not. There were no walls. Okay, around there was an area that marked out the kind of sacred pressing. But really, truly, what kind of marked out the, I suppose, what really marked it out were these idols. Okay, let me kind of show you. I did see that someone had created like an image. This is not an actual, at that time, but someone's kind of created one. So hold up. So look at that. As you can see around it, there's all these idols. This is potentially how it would have looked at that time. Okay, potentially, like I said, potentially this is not actually, I mean, someone just kind of created this. But this is so you get an understanding of how it was. Okay, you get an understanding of how it was. So you have these kind of, all these kind of idols that, surrounded around the Kaaba. Okay, the statues, all these kind of different deities at that, and the Prophet ﷺ doesn't destroy the idols first. He makes the tawaf. And he makes the tawaf alone, with only Muhammad ibn Muslima holding the reins, leading around the house, okay, leading Qaswa around. And then the Prophet ﷺ turns to the idols. Now it's either like a case of continuing after the tawaf, then he starts pointing, or later. But either way, he just starts to point to them. And then he recites, وَقُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلُ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. Okay, so it's, and say, the truth has come and falsehood has vanished. Surely falsehood is ever bound to vanish by its very nature. Just like that, I just kept mentioning, just and pointing 360 all the way. They just start, either whichever side they were facing. If they were facing towards the Kaaba, they were falling forward on their face. If they're facing away from the Kaaba, falling, again on the face, the opposite direction. Okay, so one by one, the idols fall and they topple. 360 of them, one for each day of the year. Okay, what's he done? He's destroyed the wall of falsehood that surrounded the truth. Okay, now think about the symbolism of this. Okay, there's a wall of falsehood that surrounds the truth, and the Prophet ﷺ has destroyed that wall. Okay, he's destroyed the barrier between people and the truth. Okay, there's this great symbolism in this. Okay, everybody could see that the blessing of the truth it was. Now it's free to spread. It's now free to spread. There's nothing to stop it. Okay, these idols quite literally come between people and God. Quite literally come between man and God. That's why those idols came there in the first place. Okay, that's why people had idols in the first place. Why do you worship these idols, or Quraysh? We worship them in order to draw near to Allah. But you can't draw near to Allah with a car that has no wheels. Where's that car going to take you? You're sitting there, kind of revving the engine. You're not going anywhere. Okay, so take something as a ladder, and for it to end up becoming a barrier, what's that? And the Prophet ﷺ is now saying, no more barriers between men and God. And God, I'm getting rid of them. Okay, and he gets rid of them. And that's when then that's when he then turns to the Quraysh. But it's kind of, he worships inside the Kaaba first, but then he turns to the Quraysh and he says to them, for all the things you've done, for all the harm you've caused, for all the kind of, for all your blindness in denying the truth, your disbelief, you disbelieve in, you deny him, you reject him, you chased him, you try to kill him, you chased him out of your home. Remember all that amount, when he stood there, looked back at the Kaaba and says, I do not want to leave. Okay, I do not want to leave. All of this, okay, what is it? All of this, you kind of, you went to war with him. And now he's back, okay? And this time he's not back under a flag of peace for Umrah with just a sword at his side, and a bow for, hunting, dressed in a pilgrim garb. No, he's not come like that now. He's not come because you've let him come. They let him come that, last day you let him walk in. I say you signed a treaty to let him walk in for like 3 days, and then off you go. Literally, 3 days were up and off you go. Even though he was getting married, no. Not one more minute, off you go. Okay? He's back. This time he's not wearing ihram, he's wearing like a male. His head is not uncovered. He's wearing a helmet. Okay? And he's come around. He's come armed for war. He's come as a conqueror. Okay? He's come as a warrior. Okay? He's come with strength. He's come with an irresistible force. And what's he going to do with you? Oh, oath breakers, treaty breakers, treacherous people. What's he going to do with you? Okay, what should he do with you? What does he do with you? What does he say? Even when he says to them, okay, what should I do with you? What should I do with it? I'm putting in your position. You guys tell me. What should I do with you? You know you've done wrong. They know they've done wrong. They know they're going to be punished. They know they deserve to be punished. But he still asks them the question. Going back, like this is, the Prophet's status here. I'm in this position now. What should I do with you? When they say, oh, you're merciful, your nature, etc. And he responds, there'll be no revenge, no retaliation. Okay? Nothing on you today. Okay? Not like I have forgiven you. No, but God has forgiven you. Forget me, God has forgiven you. And he's like, did I not tell you, God was merciful. Did I not tell you that this God was merciful? When the Prophet ﷺ said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the Quraysh had then said, oh, we know Allah, okay? And we know that Rahim means, what is this Rahman? Who is this you speak about? That's when you get, Surah Rahman. That's the reply, Surah Rahman. There are many signs that come in that, okay, surah. Just that surah is full of signs of the blessing of God. It's full of it. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ kind of, this is what he says to them. There's no revenge, there's no retribution here. Okay, from there, then what happens is the Prophet ﷺ then withdraws to Mount Safa. Okay, the same mountain where he had called his family to preach to them. Okay. SubhanAllah, it's amazing where the dawah started from. When he stood on that mountain, the dawah started from, and almost like you can say it's ending there now, because they are going to all come to him now. He's conquered Makkah. Start and finish, that's where it is there. Okay, so that same mountain where they abused him, now he accepts the Quraysh, and people come to the Prophet ﷺ in kind of droves, in numbers, in groups, accepting Islam in his hands, seeking his forgiveness. And kind of this was the real conquest of Makkah. Not the military conquest. This was the real conquest of Makkah, that he conquered finally the hearts of the Quraysh. And he conquered the hearts of the Quraysh with two things. When they witnessed his power, and then when they witnessed his clemency. Okay, so when the Prophet ﷺ kind of coming back from one of his campaigns, our teacher gave this example that when the Prophet ﷺ was coming back on one of his campaigns, and he was resting under a tree, and there was no kind of Sahaba, the Sahaba were at a distance, okay, there was no one around, and this chieftain sneaks up on the Prophet ﷺ, and he gets his sword and he stands in front of him, above the Prophet ﷺ, and he says, oh, who will protect you now? Okay, who is it that's going to protect you now? And the Prophet ﷺ just looks at him, and straight away, without what they say, like instantly, without thinking twice, instantly the Prophet ﷺ says, Allah. Okay, he says Allah, and then what happens? As soon as he says Allah, the chieftain is kind of overawed. Okay, it's like he has a stroke. He becomes paralyzed. The sword fell down from his hand, and he falls on the floor. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ then stands, picks up the same sword and holds it over him and says to him, who is it that's going to protect you from me now? Okay, and then kind of the man realizes and he enters Islam. The Prophet ﷺ says kind of to him, take my hand, and he's kind of he's paralyzed. Remember, the Prophet ﷺ says, take my hand, and his paralysis goes away. He grasps the hand of the Prophet ﷺ. He's healed. He stands up. The Prophet ﷺ gives him his sword back and says, go back to your people and tell them what you've seen. Okay, that is what happened to the conquest of Makkah. Okay, what happened to the conquest of Makkah? For 8 years, the Quraysh had been holding that sword over the head of the Prophet ﷺ. Who will protect you from me? Who will protect you from me? And now the Prophet ﷺ responds after 8 years, or for 8 years, over 20 years if you include them time in Makkah. All of those years, the Prophet ﷺ's response had been Allah. Okay, now the Prophet ﷺ is standing over them, and he has the sword in his hand, and he's saying to them now, what do you say, Quraysh? What you're thinking, like, look at this response, because they still know that the Prophet ﷺ, they expect nothing but good from him. Okay, Abu Sufyan said to him, you are by nature a person of clemency, a person of forgiveness, a person who tolerates. And what is mercy? Mercy is not kind of forgiving from a position of weakness. Mercy is to forgive from a position of power. Real mercy. Real mercy is when you have the kind of unrestricted power to punish and bring retribution to those who have harmed you, and then you hold back. When there's nothing stopping you, but then you stop. Nothing stopping you from punishing those, or from taking revenge on those, who have wronged you, and you forgive. That's mercy. Okay. And this is the Fatah of Makkah, the opening of the city, but the opening of the hearts, of its inhabitants. What brought about was the Jalal of the Prophet ﷺ, his majesty and his might, but also his Jamal. And the Quraysh needed both. One was not sufficient; they needed both. Okay. So these are kind of some of the lessons of the conquest of Makkah. It might actually be asked, I suppose, why is it that the Prophet ﷺ was so fixed on Makkah? What if Makkah didn't believe? You're sending messages to Byzantine emperors, you're sending messages to all the other rulers. But what was one of the first commands that the Prophet ﷺ received? Warn your near kin, okay? Warn your family members. Give admonishment to your family. The last two commands of the Quran, one, O believers, repent to Allah, or kind of return to God with utter sincerity. So it's it has so there's two meanings. One, repent to your Lord with utter sincerity, and the second meaning, return back to your Lord in the best possible way. And the other is, O believers, ward off from yourselves and your families of fire, the fuel of which is men and stones. So who are the family of the Prophet ﷺ? Who are his extended family of the Prophet ﷺ? The Quraysh. They had extended families. So that's why there was this kind of great inayah about the Quraysh. If I can't bring my own people, my own relatives into this religion, then I am, am I kind of fulfilling the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Am I bringing other people, but am I fulfilling that command? Okay. So here you have what you might call the kind of political climax. The Prophet ﷺ returns, the refugees kind of return, the conqueror, the refugee returns both as conqueror and forgiver. Okay, and the Quraysh come and they accept Islam. Actually, it just reminds me that last week there was a lot of information coming about, and what happens normally at the end of the lesson is my son kind of walks into the room, and in his reaction is kind of tells me how the lesson's gone. And he walked in, he goes, that was confusing. I'm thinking, oh great. So there was a lot of information, but let me just quickly summarize so people understand. So you got the conquest of Makkah, what we talked about last week a lot. I think what the confusion was because of Abu Sufyan coming, here back and forth. So there's kind of two versions here. One is that they reached the outskirts, and that's when the first time the people of Makkah noticed that there's this 10,000 strong army coming. The other is that even up until that point they did not know, and Abu Sufyan kind of went off, and even up until that point they did not know, and Abu Sufyan tried to kind of negotiate or whatnot, and he stays there. And then the following morning, when the Prophet ﷺ tells him, okay, this and this, he becomes Muslim. Then that's when he returns and he starts saying, oh look, what, they're coming now, just give up. And his wife's there pulling at his mustache. So there's two things here. So either that's the point. So Abu Sufyan the confusing part is maybe Abu Sufyan approaching them, then he coming back to warn his people. But that's what happens. They reach there, the army reaches there, and then that's when the Prophet ﷺ enters Makkah. And they enter in 4 different directions. And that's when one of those that were entering, that were led by Khalid ibn Walid, were attacked by Ikrimah. Remember? Ikrimah, the son of Abu Jahl. Okay, he still doesn't give up. I'm going to still attack. He attacks, and it was a small thing. It was a small thing. It's nothing major, basically. Okay, so hopefully that's clarified the point that they reach that point. Abu Sufyan comes, the discussion takes place, all of those things happen where he sees the army coming, he sees the might, where he says, oh, to the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, Abbas, that your nephew's kingdom is so great, and he says, no, this is prophethood. This is not kingdom. This is prophethood. So that's when then he returns back, because the Prophet ﷺ says anyone that's in the haram kind of will not be attacked. Anyone who's in their houses, close the door, will not be attacked. And anyone who's the house of Abu Sufyan, because Abu Sufyan was the one that he liked power, he liked to be important. So when he returns back to his people, what's the first thing he says, or the only thing he says? The Prophet, he didn't say the Prophet at that time as well. He says, Muhammad has said, anyone in my house will be forgiven. They're protected. And then when they all start saying, how big's your house? 2,000 odd people here. How are we going to all fit? That's when he said, okay, that's fine. If you're in the haram, and if you're in your own houses and you close your doors, then he lets that part out. But so that's the situation before the Prophet ﷺ entering. Then the Prophet ﷺ enters. He does the tawaf, the idols, destroys the idols, enters Kaaba, gets the keys, enters Kaaba, prays in there, removes any idols and any pictures, etc. out of there. We just mentioned one of those hadiths where they had pictures of Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam, Sayyidina Ismail al-Islam, and he cursed them for that. Okay, so that was the situation. Hopefully people kind of understood that that's how it was. So what happens is, like I said, he goes off to Mount Safa, and they come in there. Now, what happens is, and there's kind of two versions here. Sorry, I'll mention this part actually, and I'll tell you what the kind of two versions are basically. But you have people coming there, and they take kind of oaths, the hands of the Prophet ﷺ, in big numbers. And you've got the father of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. He brings his father to the Prophet ﷺ, and his father accepts Islam. Remember, his father stood on that mountain looking ahead. His father's blind, and he says to his daughter, tell me what you see. What is it? Like I said, he's remembering back Abraha, year of the elephants. Tell me what you see. At that time, we were saved. We're the people of Allah. Now tell me, and nothing happens. That's when he realizes he is truly a prophet. So anyway, this is when he becomes a Muslim. So Abu Bakr Siddiq comes back, and he takes his father to the Prophet ﷺ, who says the Shahada. And Abu Bakr Siddiq kind of is a bit sad, and he says to the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, if only I would have been more pleased that instead of my father, had it been your uncle Abu Talib, okay, because I know you loved him so much. So again here, and similar to, remember I mentioned a couple of weeks ago how Umar mentioned as well that to Abbas, that I'm pleased that you became Muslim, more pleased than had my father became Muslim, because of who? The Prophet ﷺ. So look at the love that they had for the Prophet ﷺ, always thinking about what made him happy. Okay, so this was the father of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. What also you have is, so like I said, those that come about and they accept Islam. Now what happens is that the women come. Okay, the women come. There's another conversion. Let me mention the other conversion first, actually. So what you have is Al-Harith ibn Hisham. Okay, Al-Harith ibn Hisham. He's discussing with Abu Sufyan. Sorry, I'm going here and there. I keep remembering things now. What else the Prophet ﷺ does before going to Mount Safa is he instructs Sayyidina Bilal to go on top of the Kaaba and say the azan. Remember we mentioned about when the Umrah Qadha, that it happened then. So there's difference of opinion whether it happened then, but it definitely happened here, the Conquest of Makkah. So he stands on the Kaaba and he says the azan. Okay, and look at this, subhanallah, how he's been honored. Look at everything he went through. He stayed steadfast, kind of thing, and look how he's been honored. Okay, look how he's been honored. And what you have is Al-Harith ibn Hisham. He says, Al-Harith ibn Hisham, this was the full brother of Abu Jahl. Okay, full brother of Abu Jahl. Now, he's there with Abu Sufyan, and I think the third person with them was Utayb ibn Harith, I think so. So they're having this conversation, and he says, you know what, thank God my father did not live to see this. So he's like, it's the fact that I'm glad my father's not here. To see a black slave standing atop the Kaaba, okay? A black slave standing atop the Kaaba, and Abu Sufyan is there. And Abu Sufyan, remember, he's become a Muslim. He's become Muslim, and Abu Sufyan says, I'm not going to say anything, like my lips are sealed. Stones themselves would testify to the Prophet. So he's trying to say that if I say anything, these stones will tell him what we've said. So my lips are sealed. Okay, my lips are sealed. Now, so they're having this conversation, and then what happens is later on the Prophet passes them by, and he says to them, "Oh, you're having this conversation, weren't you? The three of you were having this conversation, and you said this to him, and he said this to you." And that's when Al-Harith ibn Hisham says that he was so amazed. He goes, no one else was there from us, and none of us would have told you. And that's when he becomes Muslim. Okay, that's when he becomes Muslim. Now, another thing that happens, obviously, is that after the people, like they come in big numbers, and they take the oath, they take shahada, then they take oath, and etc. Then it's the women's turn. Okay, then it's the women's turn. And what happens is that the women come in big numbers, and they amongst them is Hind. Okay, Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan. Okay, Hind bint Utbah, and like an opportunity for her as well now. Okay, so she goes as well, and they're all standing there, and the Prophet ﷺ there, and then he tells them, he says, and there's two versions actually. One is that she comes, and the Prophet ﷺ he forgives her. So she comes to the Prophet ﷺ veiled, she comes veiled before him, and she testifies that there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger, and that I seek forgiveness for all my wrongdoings and past deeds. And the Prophet ﷺ immediately recognizes her as Hind, and he forgives her. Okay, he accepts her Islam, he forgives her. So the other version is basically that they're all together there, and she's got like a niqab, she's got her face covered, like veiled, and the Prophet says something telling. He says that that when you become Muslim, all of you, these are some of the instructions for all of them, that you need to leave your gods, your idols. And that's when Hind speaks up. Okay, and she, Hind was that type that she lets it know. She's the type who speaks out, and she speaks up and she says, "Oh, you didn't ask that for the men. Why is it just the women?" And again, she assumed that the Prophet didn't say to the men. She wasn't there. Well, you didn't ask that for the men. Why is it the case for the women? Okay, but then she said, "Okay, that's fine. We'll accept that. We'll accept that. Let's move on." The Prophet then says that don't steal, and then she says, and one of the versions is here, because there's slight variations in terms of the version, but it's like she says, "Oh, I stole from Abu Sufyan." Okay, sometimes I stole from Abu Sufyan sometimes, and Abu Sufyan was actually there. Okay, Abu Sufyan was actually there, and he was like tense as well, because he's thinking, what, he didn't want any problems. He wanted her to be forgiven as well. So he speaks up, "Oh, that's fine. Anything in the past has been forgiven. Anything in the past has been forgiven." So the Prophet says, "I'm still, he doesn't really say anything to her. He still kind of continues with what he's saying." And then he says, Hind kind of says to the Prophet, because obviously she's let out, she's etc. And the Prophet knew, and she goes, "Forgive me for my past." And this narration kind of says that the Prophet remained silent. Okay, because you talk about forgiving for yourself and then forgiving for loved ones. Okay, so he remains silent. Okay, he remains silent according to this version. And then the Prophet says, "No zina," and she kind of says, "Oh, like, wow, would any free woman commit zina?" This was something that was unheard of for them. So those that of high status, etc., they wouldn't go into this zina. How things have changed so much now. But anyway, that's what she says. And then finally, the Prophet says, "No killing babies." Yeah, no killing babies. And she says, "Oh, we looked after them as babies. When they grew up as adults, you killed them at Badr." Okay, you killed them at Badr. And this narration actually, when mentioning here, he mentions that Sayyidina Umar, after hearing this and after hearing this reply, he couldn't stop laughing. It's like, like he's on his back, like laughing so loud. I think, this response, they found it so funny. And then there's this take about the Prophet themselves saying Umar to take the bay'ah or the oath of all these women. They've come around to become Muslim. Okay, so that's the situation when it came to Hind. I'm just trying to think, look at the time. There's certain people. So there's some more conversion, etc. But what I want to do is, I really read that actually. Okay, let me just tell you this final story. That's a story about this final event, and then it's going to take a while. Okay, never mind, leave it then. We leave it until next week, because what we've got is the Prophet ﷺ then spoke about certain people that will be killed. So wherever you find them, kill them. And the mercy of it is that even within these people, pretty much half of them were still spared. And then you got an event of Sayyidina Khalid, who's sent to destroy a temple. So we'll mention that as well. Okay. So what's going to be likely that next week is probably going to be the last lesson before Ramadan, because the following week, either that following Monday is going to be first of Ramadan, or it's going to be the first Tarawih. Okay, so likelihood is that, well, it's going to be either way. From what I looked at, the likelihood is that the first Ramadan is going to be on the 12th. Okay, those that follow Saudi, probably they will start on a Monday. And again, I'll mention a quick what the difference is next week, so people understand. So we don't have all these big battles. But yeah, so more than likely next week is going to be the last lesson before Ramadan. So it's probably going to be good. So we're going to finish off on the Conquest of Makkah. So today was part 3. Next week will be part 4. And I think that should hopefully cover off the Conquest of Makkah. So it'll be a good place to stop. And then we'll take a break for Ramadan, inshallah. And then we'll, convey straight after Ramadan, obviously. Because my daughter was trying to ask me how long left, and I thought, it was just guesswork the way I do it. But I don't know. It's a difficult one. Probably a month or 2, if that. Okay, we should inshallah complete it. But let's see how things go. We leave it at that. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.